Hey everyone, welcome back to another Rugged DIY. Today we're going to continue the second floor renovation, and the primary focus of today is going to be working on paint preparation. So to start things off, we're going to mud and tape the opening for the access to the attic crawl space. And after we're done with that, we'll work on knocking in some of the nails that are kind of protruding through the walls, and then we'll mud over those. And we have some seams that have kind of cracked and separated inside the closet, the ceiling, and in the hallway that we're gonna tape and mud as well. But we really want to get started on mudding and taping the access entry so that we can get the access door up and kind of trap out all of the heat and humidity that is coming inside of the room. All right, so let's get going. Now, before we get started taping, I just wanted to take a quick second to talk about the joint compound or mud or plaster that I like to use. And I just like an all-purpose plaster or compound. You can buy these in buckets that are already pre-mixed, which makes it a lot easier. Now, you can also add a little bit of water to it to thin it out if you're doing something like a skim coat or something like that. But I really find these all-purpose compounds to really satisfy the vast majority of mudding, taping, plastering that I do throughout a project. Now, there have been instances where I've bought the powdered mix that you mix yourself, and I purchased that because I wanted something that dried a lot faster and harder than something like an all-purpose compound. It was very specific to that project that I was doing. But I think for the vast majority of people that are just doing a simple room facelift or renovation or whatever you call it, an all-purpose compound is going to satisfy most of your needs. Now, to get started here, this is a bucket that I have already been using on other portions of my house and other projects, and it's been sitting for a couple of months now. And so some of the water has separated out and kind of risen to the top of the compound. So what I want to do before I get started mudding and taping and plastering the walls is just give it a good mix to make sure that it's a nice consistency before I get started. So that's pretty much it, just a simple mix to create a better consistency of the plaster since it's been sitting for a while. And you can get these mixers at most of your hardware stores. Okay, so depending on the project that I'm doing, there are a couple of variations of how you can hold your mud, but for what I'm going to do today, I prefer to use just a trough like this. And all you're going to want to do is just dig down into your bucket and just take off what you think you're going to need. Make sure that you always put your lids back on to keep the moisture in so that your mud doesn't get dried out and become useless to you. Alright, so the first thing I want to go over is taping a corner. And the first thing that you want to do is just take your tape and figure out the length that you want it to be. And then all you have to do is hold the tape up against the wall, brace it with your knife, give it a quick tear, and you get the length that you want. And all of these drywalling tapes have a seam that goes right down the center of the tape so that you know exactly where it goes, right? So I can go ahead and show you here and give a nice corner to where I want to tape. Okay? Now, when applying the mud, all you want to do is just get a thin layer of mud, maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, that goes the length of your seam on either side. I have a little bit of a pocket around here that I want to fill in, so the first thing I'm going to do is kind of compact a little bit of mud into that area before I go ahead and apply the tape. All right, so just get a little bit and just push it in right? Push it in again. Just kind of get it in there. Right. Okay. So that's kind of filled in that little gap. That's good enough. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and just apply a layer of the mud. Back you up a little bit so you can get a little bit of a better view. Okay. All right. A little better view. All right. And don't worry too much about whether it's perfect. You're going to be compressing the tape into this mud, and you're going to be removing a little bit of the excess anyway. You don't want to have it so thick that it's difficult to even apply the tape, but obviously you don't want to have it so thin the tape doesn't adhere and it gets saturated. Okay, I think that's a pretty good application. Okay. So now all we're going to do is take that tape and fit that corner into the corner. Use your knife to kind of find your corner. Alright, now you don't want to use a whole lot of pressure at first, but just a little bit of pressure to put it down. Just use your trough to put the excess away. Now, I'm not applying a significant amount of pressure. I'm really just pushing the knife up against it enough to apply enough pressure to force out the excess. But I don't want to push all of the mud out, just enough that it's forming the tape up against the wall. And what you really want to do is make sure that you are removing any gaps. You don't want there to be any gaps in between the tape and the mud, or you're going to have a serious problem with adherence, and the tape is just going to come apart later. That's part of the reason why I have to re-tape seams around this room, because whoever did the mudding and taping in this room did not get a good adherence of the tape, and so the tape has bubbled away and needs to be redone. I get a good seal on it. To get a good saturation of the tape, what I like to do is just take a little bit of putty, or compound, whatever you want to call it, and just do a real light skim coat right over top, just to make sure that the tape is nice and saturated. Because getting that tape saturated is what's going to help you get that seal. Okay? Yeah. All right, that's pretty good right there. It's got a pretty good seal. Look, you don't want to overdo it. If you keep going over it and over and over it, you're going to overwork it and you're going to drive yourself nuts trying to do it. Now, I learned how to drywall and mud from watching other YouTube channels. The first time I ever did drywall, I watched about 12 hours worth of YouTube videos learning how to tape and mud. And there are numerous different approaches. And no single approach is perfect and no single approach is right. It's really about what you get comfortable doing, and it's gonna take time for you to gain that skill and to really feel like you have it mastered. Not to say that I'm a master at this, but I feel pretty comfortable about what I do because I've been doing it enough now in the renovations of my home that I get a consistent outcome in the mudding and taping that I do. And I have rooms that have been taped and mudded for years now, even bathrooms, that I've had no issue with the tape separating or any issues with the drywall that I've put up. So I feel comfortable in my skill. But what I suggest is, apply, the lessons that I've shown you here. But by no means should you just take my word for it. Look at other videos. There are a lot of great DIY videos on YouTube that will walk you through their method. And I think by seeing all of those different methods and coming up with your own approach is the best way to go about it and to teach yourself. All right, so we'll let that sit and we'll get this other seam over here and I'll show you that one as well. Now before I continue on, I need to take care of this because if I just tape over this is all going to come off and I'm going to have serious issues, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can remove this, okay? And we'll be able to mud over this and kind of seal this back up, all right? But you don't want to have a bunch of pieces that are bubbling away because that's going to cause serious problems with your finish in the future. But by cutting this part away where it stopped separating, because this is kind of firm now here, then I can come over this, after I do this joint, I can come over this later and mud over all this and smooth all of this out and kind of seal this back up. All right, so go ahead and show you the cut again. Okay. It's not a beautiful tear at the bottom, so go ahead and just take that off. All right. Now, the very bottom of this is going to be covered by molding or trim, whatever, base molding, whatever you want to call it. So I don't have to worry about going all the way down to the bottom of the floor. But I like a little bit of an overlap above here just to give myself kind of something to attach to. All right. So that looks good. We will use that. Alright. Okay, now I don't have any major separations here, but I'm just going to go over some of the seams a little bit and just kind of compact it in a little, just to make sure that I got a little bit of mud built up inside there to start off. Okay, that's good enough. Now, because there's a layer of paint built up on the wall, the separation here is not exactly even, right? So this is a little bit depressed from this. But that's fine, because we're going to build this all up with our mud. Okay? So, we're just going to kind of build up that layer, not pushing real hard, building up about 1/8 of an inch layer underneath there, right? Okay. I think that's good. I got a decent amount of mud there that is going to adhere to, and I'll just hit that a little more. Alright, and all we want to do is just overlap that seam. Smooth it out. Okay. Good. All right, now I like to just start a little bit below the top, apply a little bit of pressure, and just kind of smooth that out a little bit. Okay. I haven't put a lot of pressure on there. It's not enough to squeeze all of the mud out. It's just enough to kind of press that top portion up. You can kind of brace it with your hand here, just not real hard, just brace it with your thumb a little bit. And again, light pressure, just enough to kind of push that excess mud out. You don't want to push so hard that you're getting creases. Okay, so we've got the tape nice and smoothed out. I'm just going to take another thin layer, okay, and just go over it. Just make sure that the tape is nice and saturated so that I can make sure that it adheres to the wall. Okay. Okay, that's good. Now, come over this side here. Now before I tape this portion or this portion, I want to give this some time to dry, this area here and the area in the corner. Because if I try to come over and mud this right now and tape these seams, I'm going to cause issues with the tape that I just put down. And also, don't concern yourself with having it perfect right now. This is your first layer. You're going to come back and do multiple layers and feather this whole thing out to smooth out the whole wall from this point out, all right? So don't be too concerned if you've got some buildup just off of it. You know, I mean, if you want to, you can just a little bit. But it's a little bit heavy here, and that's okay, because all of this is all going to be smoothed out eventually. But anyway, point being, we're going to let these two pieces of tape dry. We'll come back in a couple of hours or so when it's nice and dry, and we'll do these seams. But in the meantime, we'll work on pounding in some of the nails that are protruding, securing those into the wall. We'll patch all of those with some mud, and then we'll work on some of the seams that are coming apart with the ceiling and inside of the closet so that we can mud all that up and smooth that out and get ready for paint. Okay, so I need to do some mudding and taping inside the closet, but because of the angles and how tight it is, I can't really get the camera in there to shoot while I do the work. So I'm going to show you a before and after so you can see what it looked like, why I taped it, and what it looks like afterwards. Okay, so I just literally got done telling you guys the importance of making sure that your tape is properly adhered. I just pulled this tape off of the ceiling inside of the closet with no effort. I grabbed it and I pulled and it all came off. All the mud came off. There was essentially no layers of mud over top of these. So this is a really poor job. Okay, this is supposed to be a professional. I mean, nobody's really touched this room since it was built by the contractors. But I mean, this is my case in point. Okay, so when you're attaching the mud or applying the mud for the tape, you want to have a nice layer of mud. You want to put your tape on and make sure that you get a solid seal of that tape to that mud, and then you have to come over that tape and make sure that it's saturated and it is attached to that mud, and then you have to come with layers, which we're going to do later, and you come in with layers over top of your tape until everything is nice and smoothed out. Again, terrible job, and that's why we're going to fix it. This is what the ceiling looked like after I took off that tape that was improperly attached and didn't adhere. Okay, so what I'm gonna go ahead and do next is knock in all of these protruding nails, and I'll give you an uphill shot of that. What we want to do is knock them in and then put a screw, preferably above and below, but when they're this close to the seam of the wall, we'll just stick one below it. But what we want to do is knock the nail in, secure it in, and then we'll come back over with a little bit of plaster or mud, whatever you want to call it, and just smooth that over and just give the wall a nice smooth finish look. All right, so I'm going to work my way around the room, and I'll film it as I go, and as soon as I'm done with that, then we'll come back and I'll show you the process of mudding over each one of them. Okay, so right here is where I punched in one of those nails. And so this is away from the seam from the wall to the roof. And I'm going to put one above and one below to secure that nail into place. Okay, so here you can see the depression from where I hammered the nail into the wall, and I've got a screw above and below that are just barely depressed into the wall, and I'll put a little bit of mud over that just to smooth out the appearance. Okay, so I've already gone around the room and secured in all of the nails, so I've got all of the nails secured. The next thing that I did is I went around with a nice little scraper, as you can see here. You just want to get a nice sharp scraper. Just go around the wall and remove any imperfections that are on the wall. You want to do this before you go around and start mudding up everything and patching all of the little dimples that you put in by hammering in the nails and putting in the screws. So I've already done that on the majority of the room. All I've got left is this wall here, so I'm going to go ahead and just scrape that. After I get done scraping that, the access rough opening for the access door is dry enough now that we can put the rest of the tape on. So we'll go ahead and tape that, let that dry. If we have enough time, we'll do the next layer of mud over top of that. Otherwise, we'll just put that in the next video. But that essentially is the gist of taping. But we'll go over that in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape this, knock this out, and then we'll put on the next bit of tape and see how much time we have left for that. All right. Okay, so that pretty much does it as far as scraping all of the walls. I've scraped everything off, all the walls, the ceilings, and everything inside of this room. And you can see now where all of the little imperfections that were on the wall have been exposed. And this is a good opportunity for you to remove if there are paint drips that the previous person had done that just didn't look good. You get to scrape all of that off and come back over all of these imperfections with a little bit of putty and make it all look nice again before you put your coat of paint on to finish the room. Now the other thing that I really wanted to stress is getting down along where the baseboards were and making sure that you scrape off any sort of loose paint or anything around the base of the wall that has come loose, because you want to get all of that off and repair all of that before you put up your new baseboards and repaint. Now, you don't have to worry about all of the uneven surfaces, because we're going to come over all of this with a little bit of putty and touch all of that up and make everything nice and smooth again before we put up our baseboards. Another thing to note is you don't really have to worry about anything that extends down below your baseboard, because all of that is going to be covered up by that baseboard anyway, so it doesn't really matter what this looks like. So I'm going to call it a day on prepping the walls, and we'll go ahead and tape up the rest of the access door, and then I'll start puttying up some of these holes in the wall that we've made by pounding in the nails and putting in the screws, and then we'll see how much time we got left. Okay, so you can see now that the mud that we put over this tape is pretty dry in both areas. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put some tape here. We're going to tape these areas here as well. And I think that's all we're going to be able to get done for today. It's already towards the evening, and I just don't think that I'm going to have enough time to really go too deep into doing much else. But you'll be able to catch everything else in the next video. But we'll be able to wrap this up, and this is a pretty good introduction, I think, to what it takes to properly tape a seam. Okay? So, first thing you're going to want to do is measure your length of tape. Now, you just want to go from seam to seam. So the outside edge of the existing tape that we already put down is where I want this tape edge to finish. Go ahead and cut my other pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of fill in this area here. I already know that this protrudes a little bit more right here than the rest of it. But all of this will be able to kind of fan out with the multiple layers of mud that we will put on this over time. And it'll smooth it all out so that your eye can't see it. Now, something that you may or may not realize is no wall is perfectly smooth and no wall is perfectly straight. So the whole point of mudding the wall is to create that trick for the eye where you can't see where the uneven spots are, because you've fanned it out enough that it smooths it out so that your eye can't see the imperfections. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there for now. I have this uneven portion right here, which is gonna have to dry in order for me to kind of smooth everything out. And really that's just due to the fact that this portion of wall is uneven and kind of caves in right here, just from the location of how the studs were placed when this room was under construction. So it's just a little bit of an issue which I'll be able to work through once I fan out the plaster, and that will take care of that issue. But you can see the basic way of taping off seams and the first step in mudding a wall. So I hope that was helpful, and in upcoming videos we will do the rest of this. We'll go ahead and smooth it out. We'll do multiple layers in order to gradually progress out so that you have a slow and gradual decrease in the amount of putty. Now, before I end the video, I'm just going to show you how I patch over one of the nails and screws so that you can see what it looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and do all of that off camera and just get ahead of that. So in the next video, we'll be able to focus more on prepping the wall, sanding down the first layer of mud that we put over these patches, and then coming over them again and fanning this out so that we get a nice smooth finish. Okay, real quick, just to finish off this video, I just want to show you how to patch one of these up, all right? So just get a little bit on there, and I like to go diagonally to it. And that's it. You don't need it real thick. And you're not gonna just do one coat because it is gonna kind of settle a little bit and you're gonna have like little patchy areas that you're gonna have to touch up. But that's it. You're just gonna touch that up and you're gonna go over each one. Hit up these little areas. And just do that all throughout the wall. So everywhere that we've got these areas that we touched up, we're gonna go over and we're gonna patch all that. And we're gonna come and do it in layers. Because if you try to put it on too thick, then you're gonna have an issue with a lot of sanding. So the idea is to do it in small layers and then work your way up rather than doing a thick layer and having to sand heavily to get back down. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, I hope that you will like and subscribe so that other people will be able to find my videos as YouTube will prioritize them by the more likes and subscriptions that I get. I appreciate you tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next videos. Thank you.